Hello guys, and welcome back to Tuesdays with Philly. I'm super excited for today's episode. It's going to be a follow-up from last week's episode. So if you haven't watched or listened to last week's episode, you can do so here. I'm going to put a tag somewhere so you can click on it and go back and watch it. Because today we're kind of going to be evaluating and examining the 4 Noble Truths of Buddhism. Just so wholesome. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. Let's just do a check-in right now. So wherever you are, try and slow down and come to a place of stillness and peace within yourself, connecting to the breath. And just one deep inhale through the nose. One more with a sip at the top. All right, so let's dive into the lesson of the week this week, which is also relevant to this episode's topic. And it's from the book that I have already read out a few lessons from, The 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bonnie Ware. Guys, this woman is amazing. She is my muse. I love her so much. So I think when I last did the lesson of the week, I was like that way through the book, that being the start. I'm now, I've literally got a few tiny little pages left. It's an incredible book. I really, really highly recommend it. I'm thinking of doing a book club series or section of my podcast soon, and I would love to talk about this book. It's just so incredible. And today, I'm going to be pulling another pearl of wisdom out of it. And it relates to kind of her summarizing one of the lessons and one of the biggest regrets of dying people, which is that I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So she expands on this and saying, as the wise man Buddha said more than 2 millennia ago, the mind knows no answers, the heart knows no questions. It is the heart that guides us to joy, not the mind. Overcoming the mind and letting go of others' opinions allows us to hear our own heart. Having the courage to then follow it is where true happiness lies. In the meantime, keep cultivating the heart while mastering the mind. As the heart grows, life brings more joy and peace. A happy life wants us as much as we want it. Mostly though, to break free of our own trappings, we must become observers of our own thoughts and habits. This awareness helps to find solutions and helps make them more apparent. Life is our own, not someone else's. If we are not finding some element of happiness in what we have created and are doing nothing to improve on it, then the gift of every day is wasted. A tiny step or small decisions are great starting points, as well as taking responsibility for your own happiness. A happy life can be found without having to move house or doing anything drastic in our physical world. It is about changing our perception and being brave enough to honor some of our own desires too. No one else can make us happy or unhappy unless we allow him or her to. Having the courage to be ourselves and not who others expect us to be may take a lot of strength and honesty, but so does lying on our deathbed and admitting that we wished we had done it differently. There were many other clients in between those mentioned. This regret, wishing they had been true to themselves, was the most common of all. So yeah, that's just a beautiful lesson. I think there are so many in this book, and her reference to the Buddha and the notion of cultivating and finding happiness through our connection to our heart, and that it's through growing our heart and quietening our mind. It's the heart that guides us to joy, not the mind. When she said that the main way to break free of our own pitfalls and our own, lulls of depression is to become observers of our own thoughts and habits. And when you cultivate that awareness and you can become the observer of when thoughts arise, then you can shift your perspective, or you can establish that there's a separateness and that we are not our thoughts. And you can have a greater awareness of the solutions as well to rectifying those thoughts or habits, because you can begin to see more clearly. And I think that just builds off of last week's episode, where I obviously spoke so much about the key revelations of meditation. And one of the pivotal points of that episode is that meditation allows us to become observers of our own thoughts and habits, and it can lead to some uncomfortable discoveries about ourselves and the world. But those uncomfortable discoveries ultimately bring us peace and clarity and knowing. You know, that goes back to like the other kind of overarching theme of life, which is that whenever you face something that's uncomfortable or something that invokes fear, like the only way to move through it or get over it is to move through it. So the only way to get over any discomfort or fear is not to resist it, but to move through it, to go closer to it, to merge with it, so that you can come out the other side a stronger, more resilient, more capable person. Yeah, and I just think that I hope today's episode and talking about, I guess, having a more formal discussion about the Four Noble Truths that are found in Buddhist scripture, I think it's just going to be quite fascinating trying to overlay that with the way in which I detailed my experience last week with meditation. You know, I would like to preface this episode by saying that the revelations that I had from meditating over 7 years, I had those revelations before I even knew what the Four Noble Truths were. Like, I think I only discovered the Four Noble Truths through Rick Hansen and some of his podcasts, which I will, you know, put a little reference here. He's incredible. He talks a lot about Buddhist philosophy and tries to integrate it a lot into clinical psychology, which is awesome. But he was really the first person that I came across that actually spoke explicitly about the Four Noble Truths. And I was like, hold on a second. Sorry, my jaw's a bit. I was like, hold on a second. These truths, I already have come to know these. You know, like this isn't anything new to me. But it's so fascinating that it's existed for millennia and is actually ingrained and very central to this Eastern religion. So that's really, really cool. And I think, you know, to give a bit of context about the Four Noble Truths, is that they are central to Buddhism. And the story goes that after years of spiritual seeking and intense meditation, the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya in India around the 4th to 5th century BCE. And he gained this state of enlightenment, and in doing so, through meditation, he created and shared these Four Noble Truths that came to him through meditation. And these Four Noble Truths are said to be universal and purely discovered through the Buddha. They serve as the foundation of all Buddhist traditions and are regarded as key to understanding suffering and liberation in life. Like, I think that's just so cool, because all humans are prone to suffering. All sentient beings are prone to suffering. And I think what this says, like the fact that I kind of came to very similar revelations or truths just through my own journey of meditating before I even knew the Four Noble Truths existed, I think what that says is that these revelations are accessible to all of us. And not only must they be known, but they must also be felt and experienced, you know, in order to really sink in. Everyone has the capacity to experience this profound peace and stillness and equanimity through uncovering these truths. And I just think that that's so amazing that it's accessible to all of us as long as we commit to practice. And what a beautiful journey of discovery that is. And it's kind of cool because, like, you know, I had these like revelations, and then it's like I read about the Buddha also obviously sharing these similar kind of revelations in 4th century BCE. And I'm like, oh, am I like the Buddha reincarnated? Like, I'm not, but I was told the other day that I look Southeast Asian. I was told the other day by someone, they were like, oh, so I'm assuming you're a mix between European and Southeast Asian because of your facial structure. And I was like, I just went along with it, and I was like, yes, I'm half Italian, half Chinese. So am I just a reincarnated Buddha from Eastern Tibet? I don't know. But let's just jump into the Four Noble Truths. So the first truth is that life is suffering. It's also pronounced as dukkha. That's the first noble truth. So we need to understand that life is defined by suffering, which includes not only physical pain, but also emotional distress, dissatisfaction, and impermanence. Even pleasurable experiences are temporary and can lead to suffering when they end. And so this is really just recognizing the existential reality of suffering as a way of life. So the second noble truth is samudaya, which is recognizing the causes of this existential suffering. And the root of suffering is tanha, craving, attachment, or desire. This includes desires for pleasure, existence, and even non-existence. When we cling to things, people, or experiences, we set ourselves up for suffering because nothing is permanent. Buddhism teaches that attachment to people, material things, experiences, or even ideas creates suffering because everything is impermanent. When we cling to something that it changes or disappears, as it inevitably will, we will always experience or be prone to experiencing distress, disappointment, or grief. So I think that this is really important, and it's something that I've spoken about at length, the concept of impermanence. But what is really beautiful about Buddhism is that it really does recognize that not only is everything interconnected, but everything is always constantly in flux. Everything is always constantly changing and cycling, which is just really beautiful. Obviously, they believe in reincarnation, so there's a lot of birth and rebirth and growth and decline, and it's just part of life. This is the way of life. And what's important to note here is that Buddhism doesn't advocate for complete detachment in the sense of apathy or isolating ourselves from the world. Again, indeed, it's very much focused on actually everything is connected inherently, right? So because everything's connected inherently and attachment is the root of all suffering, that's why life is inherently suffering. But instead, Buddhism encourages a balanced, mindful engagement with the world, being present and appreciative while recognizing that nothing lasts forever, and that this is a part of the path to nirvana, a state of liberation from suffering. So the third noble truth is nirodha, the end of suffering. Suffering can end when we let go of craving and attachment. So this is about recognizing how to end suffering. This state of liberation is called nirvana, a profound peace and freedom from suffering. It doesn't mean total detachment from life, but rather a deep understanding and acceptance of impermanence. Again, this is impermanence around things like our relationships to people, experiences, pleasurable experiences. When you sit down and have a bowl of ice cream, that's not going to last forever. When you cling to material things degrade over time. Or when you cling to ideas about yourself, ideas about the world is constantly changing. We ourselves change. So nirodha, the end of suffering, is about recognizing the process of letting go of our attachments and just cultivating a really deep acceptance to that impermanence, and a real grounded sense of equanimity. Truth number 4 is magga, the path to the end of suffering. Realizing that the way to overcome suffering is by following the Eightfold path, a practical guide that includes ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. It helps cultivate mindfulness, compassion, and inner peace. So that's the thing. Truth number 3 is like, okay, well, how do we end suffering? Oh, through nirvana. Well, how do we engage in nirvana or achieve nirvana? That's truth number 4, the Eightfold path. Recognizing the importance of the Eightfold path within Buddhism. And this is something, I guess, that's a lot more intricate, a lot more comprehensive, but I will briefly go over it because I think it's really profound. And the Eightfold Path is basically a fundamental concept in Buddhism, which outlines the path to enlightenment and the cessation of suffering. And it's divided into 3 main categories, which I've kind of touched on, which is cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct in our day-to-day lives, and mental discipline. So in relation to wisdom, it's about understanding reality and having a right view of the world. That's point number 1, is having this clear seeing of the reality of life as being rooted in suffering and really those 4 noble truths, and carrying that wisdom in our day-to-day lives. The second part of the Eightfold Path is having right intention. So developing thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and compassion instead of desire, ill will, and cruelty. So it's all like, it's one thing to know about the 4 noble truths, but how are you going to intend to live by those truths? The way that you can be intentional with living by those truths is to be compassionate and open and accepting of the temporality of life, and to relinquish the craving that we all inherently suffer from as humans. It's part of the human condition. We crave love, we crave connection, we crave hedonic, pleasurable experiences like sex and food and rewards. And then so this then leads into ethical conduct. flowing on from the wisdom. So it's grounded in this beautiful foundation of wisdom about the Four Noble Truths. And then you move to the actual action, which is ethical conduct. So the third step of the Eightfold Path is engaging in right speech. Speaking truthfully, avoiding lies, harsh words, gossip, or harmful speech. You then have right action, acting ethically by refraining from killing, stealing, or harmful behavior. This is obviously all about non-violent action. Obviously, I think the majority of Buddhists are vegetarian, so not harming other sentient beings, limiting our harm to the earth and to other living things. You then have the fifth aspect of ethical conduct or right action, which is right livelihood. So this is about earning in a living way. So this is about earning a living in a way that does not cause harm to others. So you're being of service to others essentially, or serving a greater good. You're not acting in a way that is driven by hedonic pleasure. You're not acting in a way, you're not working in a way that is driven by hedonic pleasure for yourself, or profiting, or greed, or acquisitioning, acquiring things and material possessions, because that's all temporary. So this part of ethical conduct, the third component of the Eightfold Path, or one of the three components of the Eightfold Path, is so important. The ethical conduct is really about living out the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. And I think through consistent practice of meditation, you can inevitably carve out this Eightfold Path in your life and gradually make decisions towards ethical conduct in your life by speaking rightly, speaking the truth, engaging in right action every day, and choosing a livelihood that is of service to other people and for a greater good. So moving on to the third component of the Eightfold Path, which is mental discipline. So right effort, cultivating positive states of mind and preventing unwholesome ones. Right mindfulness, being aware of one's body, feelings, thoughts, and surroundings in the present moment. And the eighth step is again, part of the mental discipline factor, right concentration, developing deep meditative states, leading to mental clarity and insight. The Eightfold Path is meant to be practiced as a whole rather than sequentially, guiding individuals towards wisdom, ethical living, and mental cultivation. So, how cool is that? And I think that, again, it all flows so beautifully in that you have the Four Noble Truths, and then you can establish a strong foundation of wisdom about those Four Noble Truths. And then on the basis of that wisdom, you can lead a life and act in ways that are ethical. And in doing that, acting ethically in your day-to-day life, you must also continue to cultivate and consistently engage in mental discipline and maintain that mental discipline through meditation, which is, the eighth point of the Eightfold Path, is having that mental discipline to have control over our minds and master our minds, to use the quote from this book. We want to master our minds and really cradle our hearts, because our hearts are what bring us joy. Our minds can create a lot of suffering. So when we can master our mind, that's just such an intrinsic part of this whole philosophy. Recognize is just how transformative a tool meditation is. And that's just so perfectly epitomized by the Four Noble Truths and by the Eightfold Path. And as I was saying, you can really see how sequentially, in experiencing and feeling the truth of the root of suffering and recognizing the reality of life as inherently painful, that we can cultivate so much transformation from that in our day-to-day lives, just in how we act, interact, and make choices. And I just think that the Four Noble Truths are so foundational and also inseparable from meditation. And it's through consistently reminding ourselves of those four truths that we can pave the way for the Eightfold Path in our day-to-day lives, even when we're not even conscious of it. So for example, like the wisdom for me is just so ingrained, that wisdom about the root of suffering and the need to renunciate our attachments. To me, that just it does inform all of my decisions on a day-to-day basis. Even when I'm in states of crisis, I'm just like, this is temporary. I know this is temporary. This experience of suffering, this season of my life is temporary. And, you know, I think through meditation as well, I've realized like the importance of speaking truthfully and not lying. And, you know, as soon as I started meditating, I try and reduce my meat intake, for example, and animal intake in my diet. I have done that pretty drastically since meditating, and right effort, you know, cultivating a positive state of mind, which then goes hand in hand with earning a living in a way that does not cause harm to others, and not engaging in negative speech about others. So it's all interconnected. You know, the mental discipline is required for the ethical conduct in the Eightfold Path, as is the wisdom as the foundation for both of those other three aspects of the Eightfold Path. So I hope that this has been a quite, you know, informative discussion and a general summary of the framework, some of the central frameworks of Buddhist philosophy. And I hope that you know that you don't need to, you know, go and read tons of scriptures or watch a ton of documentaries about Buddhism to learn this stuff. It's very simple, and it can all be discovered not only, just through some basic research and videos, which I'll link below, and, you know, some resources like Rick Hanson's channel and stuff, but you can discover these things on your own, which is really cool. I know that if you're watching this now, it's like, oh, that's kind of too late, but you can still experience them on your own. You've got to experience it through practice every day and through meditation and yoga and connecting with your breath and finding stillness, because it's just, and when you do it daily, when you do it consistently, all that time compounds over time and leads to just such profound growth and spiritual transformation. All right, well, I love you guys a lot. Thank you so much for listening. If you did, if you have any ideas for videos or topics you'd like me to talk about, please leave them in the comments below or message me. And yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see you on the next episode. All right, bye.